And she's like, Ma, and my mother's like, yeah. And Mum's like, the boys are gay. And my grandmother's like, what? She's like, the boys are gay. My grandmother's like, all of them? And my mum's like, all of them.
Hello, my name is Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories that they created whilst they were there, and the people that they used to know. So, we've talked on this show before about the unexpected pressure, whether that's real or imagined, that comes when your sibling or somebody in your family comes out before you do, and how that kind of puts this weird pressure on you. And again, yeah, that's probably more imagined than actual, but it's still pressure nonetheless. But in every example that we've had up until now, it's always been one sibling or one parent or one cousin. But what happens when both of your brothers come out before you do? And what does that do to your head? Well, luckily enough, we have an example available right now on this week's episode. I got to sit down and chat with the children's author, Will Kostakis, about what it is like being one of three gay brothers. And by the sounds of it, although I hate using this word, I'm going to use it anyway, they all had very different journeys. But that is not all that we talk about. We had a really interesting conversation about using writing to process and understand the world around you, and even try out some things before you're ready to have the conversations or do the things that you think you might want to do in the future. Getting comfortable in your own skin and standing in the corner of the queer bar, hoping beyond hope that no one notices you, at the very same time as hoping that somebody does notice you, which is a familiar mindfuck. Let's get into it.
Okay, so basically my origin story is I was sending books off to publishers from the first year of high school, which in Australia is year 7. Kept getting rejection letters until year 12 when I had a publisher who said, yeah, this sounds good. So I released my first book when I was 19 years old. And that was, I had no media training. I think I'd had sex with one person by the time my book came out. I was still very, very freshly baby gay. And so it was this weird space to navigate where I was deathly afraid of anyone finding out, or else, my book would be deemed inappropriate and all that sort of stuff. So my first book absolutely tanked. But my second book, I was like, okay, this is my last chance to really write something, because you can't have 2 flops in a row. So I was like, let me throw as much of myself into this second one as possible. And looking back at it, my first book, pretty queer, like all the women characters sound like drag queens. Like it's very much the Michael Patrick King school of writing women characters, which is everyone sounds like Kim Cattrall. But second book was like, no, I'm going to put, kids who grapple with their sexuality, because this might be my last chance at, writing that. And the whole editorial process, this was in 2011, 2012. A lot of it was conversations like, Will, are you sure you want this character to be gay? Because then it might be very difficult to stock this book in certain bookstores and for it to be picked up by Catholic schools. And I was pretty adamant that, the characters that were queer remain queer. But I was coming at it from the safer vantage point of, oh, but they think I'm straight, even though, listen to my voice for 2 seconds. Yay. And so that book came out and the queer characters were embraced. And so I was like, cool, I'm going to write a book where instead of the gay characters being on the margins, they're actually going to be front and center. And so one of my protagonists in the next book was, like me, struggling with coming out. And so I wrote that book. The publisher was really, really supportive of the queer character now. So I'm like, oh, that's different. But then when the book was released, the thesis of that book, which is called The Sidekicks, the whole point of that book is, encouraging kids to live openly, live truthfully. And one of the characters' journeys was that they would come out. But for me, I was still not out. I was out to a few friends and some family, but I wasn't out widely,
Oh,
especially
that's
not professionally.
interesting.
And so I was like, oh, I'm kind of being a hypocrite at the moment. And so I came out as gay, but I was one of those gays who was so afraid to say the word. Yeah. So my coming out, I wrote an article that was it was all about having close friends. So I don't know how long you were sort of dating people before you came out, or if you just came out fully formed beforehand. But I was one of those guys who would go out with guys, and it was great, and I loved it, and I knew I was gay. But once I put a word around it, then it would make it real. And I didn't want it to be real, if that makes sense. And if anyone ever came up to us and saw us on one of these dates, they wouldn't be my partner or my boyfriend. So I'd be, oh, this is my close friend. And so I wrote an article about how I didn't want to have close friends anymore. And that was it. So I never said the word gay, but it was very obvious what I was talking about. And my friend wrote for a gay publication at the time, and I showed him, and he's like, well, this is great, but, it's not gay enough. Gay it up a bit. And so I did. I was like, look, do I need more references to Kylie? Like, what do I have to do here to make it gayer? But then I realized, it was better the way it was. And so instead of going with a publication, I just put it up on my website, and a whole 4 people saw it. So it wasn't this huge coming out moment. But then I had booked a few schools to launch the book at. And one of the librarians read that blog post, and she emailed me and said, in light of that blog post, it's no longer appropriate for you to come and speak to our year 7s. And I'm like, 1, you've already heard me speak before. 2, I didn't even say the word gay. And I had literally spent the past 3 years touring a book that was very much about my Greek identity and, growing up Greek Australian. But there was this part of my identity that now you were telling me I couldn't talk about. And I was like, nah, piss off. And so I told them politely to get nicked. And then I was super cheeky, and I put because I knew that this would keep happening in the shadows if I let it. And so I redacted all of their information. Mm-hmm. I put their email up on my website and my reply. And I just said, hey, just FYI, don't send me this email. And then that is what blew up. And it got picked up by media here and internationally. And then it was basically how I came out to most people was sharing that on Facebook, back when people used Facebook. And I was like, hi, everyone. Sorry for not telling you, but here is a thing. And so that is how I came out to most people.
Okay. All right. I've got a lot of follow-up questions.
Good.
Let's get into them. So then, you've just described the process around 3 books, right? And the second book had queer characters in it. And then when that was positively received, did that not give you any impetus to be like, oh yeah, BT Dubs, that was based on stuff I know about?
Yes and no. There was still I would speak at a school where, I'll give you an example. It was year 10, all girls school, had just studied the book, which is called The First Third, as part of their English studies. Literally, they just finished reading it, so they're aware of all the content in the book. And just before I'm about to speak, teacher pulls me aside and goes, Will, just so you know, don't mention the gay character, and go. So it was just this what the fuck do I do? And so it was just this, the gay character, even though he was on the margins, he was still, he was the main character's best friend, and, he was the comic relief, and he was, one of the beating hearts of the book. And I remember having to give that talk, and it's as I'm speaking, I'm cutting out the queer character who I was using to talk about experiences that I'd had. And that is just death by 1,000 cuts. But the really funny thing is that teenagers know when you're bullshitting them and when you're doing something like that. So after I gave my talk, and it wasn't my best talk because I'd cut out all the fun, entertaining stuff, I go, who's your favorite character? Because I'd never met a cohort that had actually read it before and studied it. Girl puts up her hand. I'm expecting her to say the Greek grandmother. And she goes, oh, I really like Styx, the gay character. And I'm like, oh, good for you. Moving right along. and I'm like, what's your favorite scene? And she put her hand up again. I'm like, oh, shit. And she's the only one who's put her hand up. And I'm like, oh, okay, yep. And she's like, I like the scene where he loses his virginity. And I was like, oh, yeah, I am never getting invited back to this school, right? And so by this point, I'm like, okay, so I'm assuming this girl is hetero. And I'm like, well, why does this scene, which was a kid with cerebral palsy, grappling with losing his virginity in a very image-obsessed Sydney gay culture. You may have seen it on Instagram. And I was like, oh, so why did that scene speak to you? And she was like, oh, it helped me understand my friend Sam a little bit better.
Aww.
And it was, you watched all the girls around just nod, and it was like that bit of understanding, and like the teacher looked fucking ashamed of themselves. And I'm like, yeah, fuck you. But it was like experiences like that. It was...
Yeah, but so then why did that not make you go like, yeah, man, yeah, I'm going to stand up in my queerness?
I did. That's why I wrote the fucking book, and that's why I eventually came out. But in that moment, I'm sitting there like, okay, the teachers are the ones who are booking me, and they're telling me don't talk about this pretty pivotal part of who you are.
Yeah.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And being an author, that book was a bestseller, right? It was awarded national prizes, all that shit. In its life, in its 10 years it's been out, I have made $30,000 from it.
Mm-hmm.
All the other money I have made, the stuff that actually keeps the lights on, is from appearances and speaking at schools, a lot of them religiously affiliated. Plus, I was still sort of not totally sort of comfortable in my own skin. By that point, I had not come out to my family, had come out to one of my friends when they got drunk. And like the day before they moved to London, like I timed that out. So I was like, okay, once you're gone, if you don't take it well, then you're done.
Okay, then. So my follow-up question then.
Yeah. Okay.
So yes, all of this context did not change at all in the time between the second and the third book. So why did the third book have queer characters?
I grew up, there's... If I go back through my sort of literary canon, I have a poem that I wrote in like year 11 that was like, I'm secretly gay, but I'm not going to tell anyone. And that was me building up all these walls. And slowly but surely, I grew more confident in bringing them down. And the thing about the third book is it was a more typical coming out story. It was a kid he was the champion swimmer at his school, and he didn't want to be looked at as the gay swimmer in the same way that I didn't want to be looked at as the gay author. But I was, totally okay with being, say, the young author or the Greek Australian author. And so writing that book, it was my process of coming to terms with that. And it's this really healing thing about writing where you get to work through situations before they happen. And as I was writing that book, I was attracting life experiences that made writing that book easier. So, I came out to my mum. I came out to more of my friends. My policy went from never tell anyone I was gay to, if they ask me a question about being gay, I will not lie to them anymore. So I was slowly but surely, becoming more confident. I'm well aware that doing this at 26 is way too fucking late.
But now you're at the point where you get your butt plug out and put it on the desk when you sit down to meet with someone. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, it's a big part of, engaging with the children. No, fucking weirdo. But no, I am now that, Kim Cattrall character that I was writing for years.
And so the thing that strikes me...
Go for it. Come on, judge me. Yeah,
No. I'm just exploring. I'm just asking questions. So when you had written this second book with this gay character and you were writing this third book and people in your life were saying like, oh, hey, what's it about? What are you writing about at the moment? Were any of them like, there seems to be a pattern emerging here?
No, it was, I'm writing a book about 3 distinct boys who are dealing with the shared grief of a best friend, and each one of them sort of grows in a different way. Like there was no conversation about sort of the subject matter. And this was, mid 2010s, which I know wasn't very long ago, but it feels like an age ago in terms of queer rep in especially Australian young adult. And in terms of books more generally, like if Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, or Love, Simon as it's more commonly known, hadn't come out yet, and if it had, it was just on release. And that was the book that really opened the floodgates. But I'm certain that book, if Becky Albertalli was openly bisexual when that book was released, I doubt it would have been as well received as it was when she was just a gentle hetero presenting woman who wrote it. And that's a big
That's
thing
sad.
in YA. It was about writing outside your lived experiences. That was so much of it. And especially with queer characters, it was no one was out. But we were starting to get these stories.
And so when you did come out,
Mm-hmm.
were people like, oh, quelle surprise? Or were they just like,
Look,
oh, yeah, well, great. Yeah, good. What'd you
There were
have for
those
dinner?
arseholes who were like, oh, yeah, finally, like we knew. And it's like, well, piss off. That's not how you say it to anyone.
So what is the right way? So if someone came out to me tomorrow, how should I respond?
Thanks for telling me. Like, oh, that's cool. Good for you. Like, that's not the, oh, well, I knew. I'm fucking Sherlock Holmes. Like, I put together the clues. Like, fuck you. It's not about you. Shut the fuck up. But I still think the MVP of people coming out. So one juicy bit that I have neglected to mention is that I am the middle of 3 gay sons.
Ooh.
So I know it's a sandwich you don't want with sauce.
Well,
I'm looking at your
what
face.
kind
It's
of sauce?
just don't make me explain the joke. Okay, so basically, my older brother came out like the week of my final exams in Australia, in New South Wales, my state. They're called the HSC. And so my older brother was like, oh my God, this is the 1 week that is not about me. Will is doing his HSC. So I'm going to come out as gay, but I'm still the same person. He bought glitter jeans and had to, like, the sort that you had to reapply the glitter to. And he'd be like, I'm still the same person. Meanwhile, leaving a trail of glitter across the hardwood floors. And so obviously my mum took that a little poorly, bless. She, crying in my bed going, oh, and I'm like, Mum, it's fine, it's fine. It took her about a week, but she got there. She got there
that was
pretty
only a
quickly. It
week.
was good.
Okay,
It was
all right,
it was good, right? But she had she did the Greek mother sort of thing. And then she's like, I can say he's going to burn in hell, but no one else can, like sort of thing. And then, became his like staunchest defender, which was really sweet. But I always knew that my younger brother, gayest thing alive. And so I'm like, okay, how do I sort of help mum on this journey that she's on? And so I'm like, okay, I can come out as gay and give her a stroke, or I can be the straight son, quote unquote, who introduces her to lots of gay people who may or may not be my partners at the time. And so I did that, and whenever she'd say anything like violently homophobic, I'd be like, oh, like let's not do that, and like let's steer you more towards this. And so she got there like pretty quickly. But I did not, shed the moniker of the straight son. And then one day we're sitting there, and she's like, Will, I saw your younger brother at the local shopping centre. And I'm like, yeah, okay. She's like, and he was with a guy, and he was the happiest I've seen him in so long, because he'd been sort of like, been a bit reclusive, shut us out of his life sort of thing, even though we were living under the same roof. And you could just see this relief, and she just exhaled. She's like, yeah, I think he's gay. And, I didn't do the, oh, no shit. I was like, oh, really? Oh, and she was like, yeah. So William, no more surprises. Are you gay? And I'm like, oh, no. I am a writer.
Chance.
And I'm like, I am a writer. I have prepared a fucking soliloquy. Like, I'm going to come out with rhyming couplets. It's going to be beautiful. I can't answer a yes or no question. And I was having that freak out over the course of like 30 seconds. Then I realized, no, she's asked me the question. I'm not lying to people anymore. And this just requires a yes or no. And so I'm like, yes, Mum, I am. And she just sits on the couch and she just exhales. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And she's like, give me a second. Give me a second. She's collecting herself, takes another breath, exhales. And then she looks me dead in the eye and goes, always thought your father was a bit of a puff. And so the thing about being in the closet is you expect the worst of people. Like you imagine like what's the worst thing they could possibly say, and you let that spook you. When really I should have realized my mom was probably going to say something pretty insensitive and take a dig at my father. Like that's what I should have expected. Like I had seen her deal with people coming out before. And once I'd come out to her, just sort of the fear was gone. And she was like, at first she had the rule where she was like, okay, we're not going to tell anyone. We're not going to tell your grandmother. And then she decided, no, we're going to tell your grandmother. But she chose the best time to tell my 80-year-old Greek grandmother, the sort of woman like she was born on a farm in Greece. She met a guy. They got married. Her presents were a shotgun and a goat. They shot the goat and came to Australia. Like, this is how old school we're talking here. Mum's driving my grandmother to the airport to fly to Greece. And she's like, Ma, and grandmother's like, yeah. And Mum's like, the boys are gay. And my grandmother's like, what? She's like, the boys are gay. My grandmother's like, all of them? And my mum's like, all of them, right? And so that's how she tells my grandmother that we're gay. Right. And so my grandmother gets on a flight to Greece, cries the whole way, I'm assuming. And then she goes to Greece and she's like, I've got to go to confession. And so she goes to confession. She finds like some fucking monastery on a hill somewhere, you know, the sort you have to ride a donkey for 4 days to get to. And she steals some holy water because that's what all the Greeks who return home do. And they smuggle it back into the country. And then she meets the priest for confession. And he's like, okay, what do you want? She's like, oh, I'm here to confess. He's like, okay, what are you confessing? And she's like, my grandsons are gay. And he's like, all of them? And she's like, all of them. And he's like, oh, okay, but what are you confessing? And she's like, oh, this, you know, they turned out gay. I must have, you know, they lived with me for a little bit. I must have done something wrong. I must have raised them wrong. And he was like, do you like your grandchildren? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, are they good people? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, well, then they're gifts from God. And so she came back, and whenever I had a partner, I have a special friend. But it was very important. She believed in only having one friend. So even my grandmother was very aware of orgies, and which is
well, she's from the country that introduced them to the world. I mean, come on.
We're pioneers, yeah, no. So yes, most of my angst about coming out was all completely in my head.
But so hang on, okay. So how many years was it between your eldest brother coming out and you coming out?
So he came out when I was in year 12, so I was 17, and I came out at 26, so that's 9 years. Which is too long. It's too long. It's way too long.
Okay, yeah. I mean, let's go the long way there. And so are you the kind that always puts other people's feelings first?
Probably, but also total fucking coward. There's the other perspective, which is he's there lying on the road and I let the buses go over him instead of like, I knew I was gay before he came out. I knew in year 5. I knew. But
did it also like take the wind out of your sails? Like, oh, fuck, it's kind of stolen my glory.
Yeah, but he's not a very glorious person. So if I was going to do it, I was going to do it better. No, I love him dearly. I remember there was a bit of that, but it was also like, the thing that pissed me off is that he very much wanted the, oh my God, I came out and then my family abandoned me. Like, he really wanted that narrative. Like, he really fucking lent into it. Oh, he did. He wanted that, say it, I'm a gay, hit me, Like, he was somebody who, when my parents had a pretty rough divorce, and he was someone at a very early age had to shoulder a lot of it, and he had to grow up really, really quickly. And I think when he came out, it was kind of like his chance at, you know what, I'm going to enjoy myself now and do something just for me. Probably a more healthy way to live your life than I do, which is very much like, I'm in this family, what can I do to help this family? And yeah, put others first. And you're not the first person to say that about a range of things.
Yeah.
But if I don't help others, I feel like total shit. So I imagine I'm the sort of person who either needs a lot of therapy or who needs to live like this. But I've learned from this experience, I won't put myself in a situation where it's causing me pain to help someone else, which is definitely sort of better. But
well, it's hard to know, though.
Probably, yeah.
Until you're in pain.
Not coming out, I knew I was hurting myself. Like you do, you know.
Oh, yes, yeah, but like in these future examples that you're talking about.
I'm pretty honest with myself. Yeah. Don't worry about me. It's okay.
And so one last thing before we get onto the midnight shift. How many of your ex-boyfriends have said that you threw yourself into writing to stifle and hide from the fact that you were gay?
No one, but...
Oh, come on. That's like the first thing you talk about when you went out on a date.
No, like...
This is why I don't get second dates, right?
Yeah, no, you therapizing people. No, that's terrible. I never threw myself into writing to escape stuff. That's the wrong perspective. For me, it's always I have a different unhealthy relationship with writing where if something traumatic ever happened to me, my first thought was always, this will make a great fucking book. It's not writing to live, it is living so that I have something to write about, if that makes sense.
Oh, but does that mean that you get into really bad situations just so you've got something to write
No, no,
about?
no, no, no. I seem to attract the fucked situations anyway, so it's fine. Like I don't.
So maybe you're doing it subconsciously.
No, 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 no. It's like the world is really fucking small. I will say that. And there's stuff that happens to me where I'm like, okay, no one could have ever scripted this. This is fucked. How do I make this a believable story? And that is usually the process of fictionalizing it. I'm not some mastermind who is like concocting these situations. But, you know, I like that after 20 minutes of talking to each other, you think I am a total nut job. And I am. That's great. I'm doing my job well.
No. I'm just floating the question of whether or not you're a nut job. I'm not saying you're a nut job.
Mm-hmm. There was an accusatory tone to the question.
No, I'm just saying, like, you know, sometimes, you know this whole thing about like, if you say, oh, I'm open to the universe and I believe that I'm able to make money and all of these mantras, you can then somehow attract money to you, according to those gurus on TikTok. I've spent too much time on TikTok recently. I'm saying that maybe you're just open to some kind of fuckery of the universe.
Maybe. There are things I have done that I'm not proud of, where I'm like, okay, well, not proud of.
Can we talk about them?
Look, no, I write books for children, so it is nothing illegal, but like...
I can pause the recording for a while if you want to tell me.
I'll tell you later. I'll be specific after the podcast. But let's just say like sex stuff where you're like, oh, I don't really think that's my bag. But you know what? And in my head, it'll be like, that'll make a great book one day. And then I've done it. But anytime I've done that in the moment, it has turned out to be a really bad life experience that I do not want to write about.
Oh, so you've jinxed it.
Yeah, probably. And there's got to be a bit of hindsight. And when you step back and you see the shape of the story.
Yes,
I don't know. Maybe I'm waffling.
Well, that's what we're here to do. So, Midnight Shift, how did we end up there? When was the first time you went? And how old were you?
No, I would have been legally allowed to drink. It was always
so
that...
you were really gay.
I was really gay, but it wasn't...
No, but... So I've probably made some assumptions in my head. I just need to clarify. I was assuming because you didn't come out until you were 26 that you were like very tentative about your interactions with the scene.
No. For me, it was, you know, by 19, I was tentative. You know, I'm just trying it out. But 20, I was like, nah, like this is very obvious. But so for me, Midnight Shift was always, okay, I've had drinks with my friends. My mum's expecting me home late regardless. I'm going to just catch a bus via Oxford Street and just duck in. But it was that weird thing where I had a gay older brother who was very of the scene. And so I'd have to know for sure that he was at home so that I was like not bumping into a brother. I mean, that's not conducive to enjoying yourself at a queer bar, but it was very...
But so, okay, just to stick on that, did he not have friends that might know who you were? Or did it not?
No, because this was part of his, like, he had his little family gay life apartheid. And so I knew none of his friends and, you know, this was 15 years ago, about 12, 13 years ago now. So, you know, we weren't all on Instagram.
And you don't look enough like him for him to be...
No, fuck no, absolutely.
That was very emphatic.
No, it's not a dig on him. He is like blonde, blue-eyed, and I, you know...
Smothered in glitter.
Yeah, look, yeah, his choice, but yeah. And so for me, it was just sort of testing the waters, like existing on the fringes of that space. But it was never... Yeah. As much as we like to talk about those places being really inclusive and, you know, they're not really. If you don't know anyone there, you're just like, you're shit stuck to a shoe. And plus, the places where somebody could come up to me and like talk to me, I didn't like those spaces because they were well lit. So it would be like the club upstairs where I could just sort of exist anonymously and just sort of hang by the walls. And it was like exposure therapy where I would, saying the word gay made my voice shake, sort of thing. So standing up against sort of the wall and just sort of breathing in that energy and just sitting in that space and
Yeah.
making myself slowly more comfortable.
So we've talked about this, like being out for drinks with your friends and then being like, oh, I'm going to go home now.
Yeah.
And then getting on a bus and going to Oxford Street, which for anyone who's listening who doesn't know is the gay part of Sydney. So do you remember the first time you ever did that?
Yep. Just terrifying, but exhilarating, but I could not fucking get out of there faster. Yeah, and so the next time it was, okay, I'll buy a drink. And it still felt very, very, very scary. It wasn't until sort of I went with a partner at the time that I felt more comfortable. But at the same time, it was, oh no, I am a straight guy here with my gay friend and I'm here to support him kind of thing. This wasn't the era of straight people everywhere in gay bars.
Yeah. Were you meeting people online and that's how you had this partner?
No, I'd never meet people I'd met. Oh, wait, no, this was the era of Manhunt. So, yes, there was some sort of online, but I was the only person who hadn't adopted an iPhone. And so I used a Nokia touchscreen. Who the hell used those? I did. But Grindr wasn't compatible with those, so I wasn't on Grindr. This guy was... I met him because I was deathly afraid of... Because if I had to choose between being gay and being a writer, I would choose being a writer. Like now I realize those two are linked and I can't be one without the other. But if I had to choose, if, my professional future relied on me being closeted, then fucking let me decorate the interior of that fucking closet because this is, sex is good, but writing is like chef's kiss. And I think my perspective on that has shifted as well. I think if I had to make that choice now, I wouldn't choose writing. I'd be like burning all the notepads going, no. Fuck off.
Your libido is going to dry up soon. Just like stick with writing.
Don't sound so hopeful. Jesus. So I was just meeting someone in a cafe and he was like, oh, I really want to read your book. And I'm like, okay, cool. Chill here. I'm going to go buy it and I'll come back. So I crossed the street, went into a bookstore. I didn't have time to go check the shelves. So I just walked up the front and I was like, hey, do you have my first book, Loathing Lola by Will Kostakis? The guy behind the counter, about a year older than me, looks me up and down and then like goes to type on the sort of chunky computer. And he's like, you know what? You look a lot like Will Kostakis. And I'm like, I'd just been caught sort of buying my own book. So I freak out like, and so I like run out, right? And then...
Wait, did you just run out?
Yeah, I just ran out. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I'm like, oh, that's worse. Now I'm like that dickhead who just walked in to buy his own book and then just ran out when they didn't have a copy. And so I'm like, okay, I've got to buy a book for uni. So I walked back into the bookstore and I went to the classic section. I was looking for Jane Eyre, right? And I'm looking for it. And this guy from behind the counter walks past and goes, oh, don't worry, you won't find it in the classics. And I'm like, you fucking sassy prick. And it was just fucking electric. And I'm like, oh, like deathly afraid of him realizing I was gay. But I'm like, okay. And so I slipped into the DMs of the bookstore on my way home and he responded. And that night we went out for drinks and his friends shed away after about half an hour. And then we ended up dating for 7-8 months. And he was like my first like proper love story. But it was a big point of contention was obviously me not being out, us going to gay bars and me fucking recoiling at his touch because we were in public and I didn't want people to see. Because it's that weird thing where when you're closeted, you think everyone's looking at you, but no one's fucking looking at you.
Yeah.
And so that relationship obviously suffered because of that. And it got to the point where I was like, I want to stop hurting people. Again, oh, it's that thing again. Oh! That's where I came out. And for those of you who are listening to audio, Kay is biting a lip and looking at me like, oh dear, William is making a breakthrough.
But the reason I'm asking about this is because it's very interesting that you went there with a partner because, most times when people are exploring the scene, they haven't yet made friends or they haven't connected with people. But you had this person who was well read.
Yeah, it wasn't. I was deathly afraid of meeting someone I didn't know everything about. Because if I was trusting them with this secret part of me, I didn't want them to be running their mouth or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But obviously over the years, after I came out to my sort of straight mates, before I came out to mum and all that, they were like, great, straight guys are always looking for a reason to go to a fucking gay bar. And I'm like, what? Why was I afraid of these spaces? Like I could have just, I took them and they had permission to like hug each other and show male affection.
Oh, wait, that's not why they wanted to go to a gay bar though, right? They wanted to hit on women.
No. They just wanted to have fun. They just wanted to sort of experience it. They weren't going to. What kind of straight friends do you think I have? Or oh my god, are you?
I'm just making assumptions. You're from Sydney. Just those Sydney siders. They lecherous and. Anyway, we're going all over the place. Let's go back to this bus trip where you go to Oxford Street. Now, on Oxford Street, there are a number of options. Why did you choose the midnight shift?
Probably the smallest line. I was not a discerning gay and not charging a cover charge. All those sorts of things played into it. So
he's frugal.
Plus, midnight shift was the first one you came to. If you were travelling east up Oxford Street, once you leave the city, midnight shift was there. And that was the one I was most familiar with because it was right next door to my gym. Because I was closeted, but still going to the gayest gym in Sydney. Even though I had a membership that allowed me to go to any of the gyms closer to me. Gayest gym in Sydney.
And so on these gym trips, how long would you spend in the shower?
Look, I believe in being clean.
Leaving the shower curtain open, just like hanging around, getting an eyeful.
Oh, no. The gays had removed the shower doors. Like, those were, quote unquote, the glory days. It was ridiculous. Like, you went to the gym to shower. I did not partake because I was deathly afraid of,
getting soap in your eyes, yeah.
Yeah, sure. They had, like, the dividers were see-through. Like, you could see everything. Like, there was no privacy in those spaces, but now it's very different.
Okay, sorry, I took us off. So midnight shift, first time, all right, going in. So you'd been familiar with it because it was next to your gym, so you knew kind of what to expect. Did you have an idea about the vibe?
People had spoken about it, and that was the bar that most people liked.
What people?
You were having sex. Yes, but I was having sex with people.
But and then you were talking to them? What?
Yes, the completely anonymous would not work for me. But a conversation before and a conversation after, where you are for an hour in your lives, you are the most interesting thing to each other, and then you are nothing. Right?
Aww, a bit like you and me.
Yeah. Is that your way of saying I am never talking to you again? No, but it's that the conversation was half the fun of it. The smacking into each other, great as it is, like that's not the part where you really feel the connection. Like it's in the ill-timed joke during or after. It's, that little thing they're comfortable sharing with you that they're not comfortable sharing with anybody else. Like that is intimacy. And so, yeah, they were talking. And I had gay friends. And by that I mean somebody that I'd fucked once who, I would still message and we would
whose number you hadn't lost, yeah. Okay, so then you had some kind of idea. But what was it like actually stepping inside and being in that space for the first time?
Look, honestly, the only thing that was running through my head was, oh, fuck, am I going to run into somebody that I know? Like, that was a large part of it. And, me sort of attracting experiences, as you say, law of attraction or whatever. Thank you, TikTok. There was one point where I was upstairs in the club and I realised the person I was standing next to was my mum's boss. And so I was like, and so, me like crawling out of the club before he sort of noticed who I was, not realising that he was probably off his chops on whatever legal or illegal substance.
And so that first time, how long was it? Because you said that you went in and then you left.
I think it would be about 20 minutes. Like, I had to stay longer than the line outside was. So
of course,
that was,
yeah. Even if you're hating it, you have to stay longer because
had to just
put the
stay
effort
a few songs, wait for a good song, and then be like, okay, I heard a good song in a club.
But then, so like running out, going home, presumably, and then in the space between that visit and the next visit, what was going through your head and what were you thinking?
I wasn't really thinking about it.
Okay.
I know it's a boring answer, but it was just that it was like my little treat. So for me, I'm drunk after 1.5 drinks, and so long as I don't get to 7 or 8, I can get myself home and be pretty put together. And it would be going out with my straight friends to the worst fucking bars ever to watch them, drink, get to that point between 4 or 5 beers where they get to have an emotion. And then I'm like, great, I could talk to you and like be open with you or whatever, but not open about everything, obviously.
Well, yeah, I mean, just hang on a sec. Are you speaking down about your straight friends not being open about their feelings at a time when you were not open about your feelings?
Do not therapize me. This is not. This is not a first date.
I'm asking a question.
Yes, but more like, even though I wasn't open about my sexuality, I was pretty open about fucking everything else to the point where it's off-putting, right? Like, I wasn't never a particularly closed book.
There were just some chapters that were stuck together.
There was a sealed section. Yes. Again, don't ask why it's stuck together. And so I would do that, and we would go to a place where some fucking terrible singer was singing Wonderwall over and over and over again. I was like, I don't fucking want to be here, but having fucking drinking beer or whatever. And then, when that night finished, then it was going a midnight shift was like my treat. It was that, okay, I'm on the bus route going home. I just have to get off the bus and then I can hop back on the bus and this bus goes directly to my house. And so it wasn't that I was itching to go back. I never had that that feeling of I want to go and have a messy gay night. I never really wanted to do that. I never felt like I needed to at that age. I think I was just too scared.
Yeah, but I'm not really asking about like whether you wanted to have a messy night, just to be around throngs of homosexuals.
That was petrifying. I can handle 1 or 2 gays on their own, but
something compelled you.
It was less about being around them and more about being more comfortable with myself, if that makes sense. Like, I had the awareness I was gay. Totally knew it, lived in it, was aware of it.
Writing poems about it.
But I was still fucking petrified of it. It still made my heart race. Like, it was about me sitting in it and being like, okay, I am comfortable with who I am. That's what it was. It had nothing to do with the shift. If I'd walked a little bit up the road and walked into the Columbian, or gone a little further up the road and walked into Stonewall, I would have... It was only ever about me. It was not really about sort of the particulars of the space. It was about me coming to terms with who I was. Well, not coming to terms with it, but just like stopping my body freaking out about who I was.
And did that space allow you to do that?
Not really. I don't think I went there long enough. I never went with the right intention. I never threw myself into the experience. It was always, I'm here, but as soon as I can fucking get out of here, I'm getting out of here.
Really?
I was petrified that a brother would walk in at any time. Like, it was...
your mum's bus. But did you not like build up more of a tolerance or more of a bravery?
I did, but it was... No, I don't think I did.
That's so interesting.
I always had one foot in the closet at all times. I never threw myself into the experience. It was just that fear kept coming back. And it was just fucking terrifying. Like, there could have been 100 other people in that room or 2 other people, and I was still like...
Is this a Lady Gaga quote?
Almost. But, Bradley Cooper isn't there going, I want you to be in A Star Is Born. But the really funny thing is, it's that once I'd come out to sort of my family, it was a switch flipped completely, and I was like comfortable in those spaces, there, hanging out, okay to be seen. And now I think back at it like, I was at the Columbian on the weekend, queer bar, and I'm standing there, and it's not even running through my mind anymore. And it's really fascinating how it happens. Like, the time between sort of coming out professionally now, 6.5 years, almost 7, and I'm like, I'm totally okay. All those fears that I had, completely fucking imaginary. The me that goes to gay bars now, very different. And it's really funny being back there and having none of the hang-ups that I had before, and all the things that, seemed really scary don't factor in anymore. And it's so fucking dark. I can't see anyone in there that I know, let alone no one's going to be in there spying on me, spotting, the closeted me in the corner. So there's a lot of sort of laughing at my old self if I remember it. But honestly, it feels so long ago now that I don't even fucking remember these feelings. Like the first time I really sort of grappled with it was when you asked me to come on here, and I'm like, oh shit, like that was a whole other life ago. But the spaces haven't really changed, but it's me walking into those spaces that has changed.
Do you have any memories of the midnight shift or clubbing from your own queer scene that you want to share? Well, if you do, I would love to hear from you. So why not get in touch? I want to create the biggest online record of people's memories and stories of queer clubbing, but I need your help. Go to lostspacesPodcast.com and find the section Share a Lost Space, and then tell me all about what it is you got up to. Why not? You can also reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where my handle is Lost Spaces Pod. You can also find out more about Will by visiting his website, willkostakis.com, or follow him on Instagram or Twitter, where his handle is handily Will Kostakis. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on your podcast platform, or just told somebody else who you think might enjoy giving it a little listen, because, it's always good to have good ears. Good ears? Good ears. New ears listening. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.